Houston, as you know, I'm a Georgist. And as you know, I like money. Okay? Now, as a Georgist who likes money, I just wanted to discuss this wonderful thing that is happening in Alaska, has been happening since the 80s, and is increasingly becoming bigger. They're giving out more money. So, you know how Andrew Yang is always like, hey guys, we got to have a UBI. And then he never explains how to pay for it?
Right.
Okay. Here's how we pay for it. The same way that Alaska has been paying for it for the last fucking 30 fucking years. That's how we pay for it. Okay? You pay for it. For context, Alaska is giving out $5,000 a year just for living in Alaska. All you have to do is you just fucking go to Alaska. Now, admittedly, Alaska is one of the worst states. We should be honest about that, right? One of the worst states. It's better than North Dakota. It's better than South Dakota. Neither Dakota needs to exist. We've been over this. But is it better than, Pennsylvania? No. Is it better than California? No. Is it better than Texas? No. Is it better than Hawaii? Don't make me laugh. Is it better than Puerto Rico, which isn't even a state? Probably not, unless you're really poor, which admittedly is a real problem in Puerto Rico, but that's a different discussion. Part of the reason, though, that people are poor in Puerto Rico is that they don't get $5,000 a year from the government. That's part of the reason. Now, how the fuck do people in Alaska get $5,000 a year from the government? You might be asking. Well, I will be telling. I will be telling. It's a lot of money. I will be telling.
Thank you for telling.
I will be telling. Yeah, I got you, babe. Okay, so
I appreciate it.
They're doing it with oil money. So there's a bunch of oil that exists in Alaska, right? That they're getting from from the Alaskan land, and that money that they're accruing is just going back as a dividend. It's just going back as a universal basic income to all of the citizens of Alaska. And it's increasing. The amount of money that they're able to get there is increasing over time. The revenue forecast adds $331.7 million by June 2021 and another $459.6 million in fiscal year of 2022. They're adding literally hundreds of millions of dollars to their UBI. It's one of the worst states. And they're able to do this shit. And how do they do it? They do it in the same way that Thomas Paine was saying that you should do it. In the same way that Henry George was saying that you should do it. In the same way that Lizzie Maggie, who I have a crush on despite the fact that she's been dead for hundreds of years, not literally hundreds, but at least 100. When did she die? She died in like 19-something or other. Well, the point is, she's dead. She's been dead for a while, but I really, really have a very intense crush on her. And also, she's fantastic, and also she doesn't get nearly enough credit in the history of America because she's very important. The point is, they're paying through it through the use of natural resources, the understanding that natural resources belong to the public, and therefore that the public should be the one who is provided funding based on the value of that public resource. That public resource, in this case, being oil. Now, is this good for the environment? No. I'll just say it straight up. No, it's not. But if you can condition this in conjunction with something like a carbon dividend, then yes, actually, this is something that's perfectly responsible from an environmental perspective. If you couple it with that context, if you couple it with the understanding that the air, the pollution of the air, right, the carbon dividend is another proposal that we've talked about a bunch on the show. But yeah, I think this is really, really a great example of the power of Georgia's policy and the power of universal basic income, because it's been shown that it's been able to.
Yeah. So if we move to Alaska, right, we get this $5,000 a year, right? Yeah. And then if that carbon dividend bill gets passed and it like actually exists, we get like $2,000. We get $7,000 just for living.
Just for living in Alaska. This is accurate. Yeah, this is accurate. Yeah. This is an accurate statement of truth. Yes. And both of those are going to increase over time.
Yeah.
Not just in line with inflation, but more than in line with inflation, because the value of the oil in Alaska is increasing over time, and the value of the carbon dividend is increasing over time. And also, we don't have to feel bad about ourselves once the carbon dividend is passed, because it means that we're actually doing something that is both fiscally responsible from a state level and from a national perspective, and also environmentally conscious. So yeah. all of this is wonderful news. Alaska.
So we should move to Alaska.
It's really fucking cold. I've been to Alaska. It is.
Yeah.
I went there in the summer and it was still fucking cold. There's
Should we go to like a southern part, like maybe that's near Washington State, or like?
There just isn't.
Oh no, it's all the way up there.
It's just like all the way up there. Alaska is just like it's just not like okay. Back in the day, right, when the Russians were at their maximum, right, before and during the time, right, like they just kept expanding, right? They were like basically in Europe, and then they were like, hey, why don't we take over this stuff? And then no one stopped them. Then they were like, oh, okay, how about this stuff? And then no one stopped them, and they were like, oh, okay, how about this stuff? And they just sort of just kept on taking over all of the shit until it was off the screen. And they were like, whoop, 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 whoop. Let's get on the screen again. And then, I'm going to move this over here. They were like, how about this stuff and this stuff and this stuff? And then they came to a fucking ocean. And they're like, how about we just pass the ocean? I'm going to go a little further. And they're like, we just pass the ocean and then we take over this stuff. And then they had Alaska. And then some random dumbass in American history was like, but we need to take that stuff. Let's buy it off of the Russians because the Russians were going bankrupt. And then we bought it. And everyone was like, what the fuck? This was stupid. This was a folly. Who was the guy? I'm blanking on his name. Someone's folly.
I don't know.
Whatever. I don't care about the guy.
Oh, yeah, I did know about what's
this
his
is a
face
thing.
folly.
This is a thing. This is the what's his face's folly. It's a thing. I would look it up, but I don't actually care what his name is. His name is irrelevant. The point is, we then bought Alaska, and then it turned out that there's a bunch of oil in Alaska, and we're like, holy shit! Now we have Alaska. It wasn't a folly. We bought it, and now we have all of this shit, all of this money, and guess who it's going to? The random people who decide to go to Alaska. They get $5,000 a year for living in the middle of bumfuck nowhere or Anchorage. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the story of Alaska.
Huh.
That's the story.
I mean, yeah. No, I think instead we should just get the rest of the country to get on board with the UBI, and then we can live wherever and get the $7,000.
Well, we wouldn't get the 7,000. We would get the 5,000 belongs to Alaskans, and I think that's valid because it is state land. It's not national land. So that component does belong to Alaskans. But there's also the component of the carbon dividend. That's $2,000 a year. And there's also the component. Right. If we were able to eventually get a national land trust or a bunch of state land trusts, that we could get all of that money. We could also get money from water. We could also get groundwater specifically is the most important component to be making sure that we're using responsibly, which means that we should be focusing on Georgia's perspective. We could be thinking about it in that sense. We could be thinking about all of this different stuff, the oil in Texas, the oil in all of these different places. I love it. I want to Georgism it. I want to UBI it. And then we will become wealthy as a country.
Yeah. Yes. Because I mean, like, the thing that I don't understand about like rich people is that like the more like rich people you have, the more fun you can have.
Exactly.
You know? Exactly. Because then you can like buy more shit and like have more parties and have more people at your parties, and you can like. You could just do more stuff, you know?
Do so many more things.
Like, I don't understand why rich people don't want poor people to become rich people.
It's very silly.
Like, it'd be so much more fun.
It's so much more fun. Yeah.
Like, it doesn't make any sense.
It makes no sense. These people are fools. What we need is a UBI so that everyone can become wealthy. And then once everyone is wealthy, then society will be less fucked. Alaska is the model. Is Alaska gross? Yes. Is it cold? Yes. Is there anything to do in Alaska? No. Should you go to Alaska? Probably not unless you're going to live there. Should you live in Alaska so you can get the $5,000? I don't want to do it, but you know,
but like you
maybe.
Could.
Like it's not a crazy idea. It's not a crazy idea. It's a pretty reasonable idea, particularly if you're like
if you get like a minimum wage job and like just kind of like chill in the city, you could totally like live off that money.
You have to live indoors all of the time because otherwise you will be cold, and cold is not an ideal situation to be in, right? But if you live in Anchorage which is, I believe, the only real city. I don't know how many people live in Anchorage, but I assume it's the only real city. I'm just going to say that and not fact check myself. It doesn't matter. The point is, I assume that there are actual cities that do exist in Alaska. If you live there,
I'm sure at least one.
Like, that would be pretty good.
Yeah,
that would be pretty good. If you could just Georgism the shit out of everything, that would be pretty good. I'm a big fan. Also doing good on COVID. They've been spending a bunch of money, like flying people out on helicopters and shit to like get people vaccinated, and they've been doing a damn good job of it. I'm really impressed with Alaska these days. Yeah, I think that Alaska's like being like the Alaska is cold. I know I've said this multiple times, but Alaska, it really is very cold. And that is the fundamental problem with Alaska, that it is just too cold to be living in Alaska. Yeah. But other than that, they're doing pretty good in Alaska. I'm pretty impressed. Good job, Alaska. So let's give a round of applause to Alaska. Yeah. Alaska's also the name of one of the drag queens on RuPaul's Drag Race. And I love Alaska on RuPaul's Drag Race. RuPaul's Drag Race is one of my guilty pleasures. Dance Moms is not a guilty pleasure. I enjoy Dance Moms unironically, and I don't feel guilty about it. I do feel a little bit guilty about enjoying RuPaul. Why? Because RuPaul. This is a different episode, but RuPaul is in fact problematic. The reason that he's problematic is that there's the problematic in terms of like his trans issues and all of that. I don't know really any of that stuff, but the reason I don't like him is because he owns like 50,000 acres of farmland, is an oil tycoon, and is like pretty bad to his workers on the oil rigs that he runs. I assume his pronouns are he, right? I think they are. When he's not in, I think that's right. But anyway, So he/they/she, I don't know, whatever it is problematic. But that is not the point of this episode. The point of this episode is that we love Alaska, both on the show and also in real life. We support Alaska. If you want money, go to Alaska. It's your get rich relatively slowly, because you only do make $5,000 a year. But if you need to get rich relatively slowly while doing nothing other than living in a cold environment.
It's a great way to accrue wealth, you know?
Yeah.
Like, if you live there for 10 years, it's like $50,000.
That's $50K. Like, $50K is not nothing.
Yeah.
$50K is like more than 40.
Save it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty good.
Like, you could accrue wealth really easily and then come back to the States.
I like how you just describe going back to the States, because Alaska doesn't count as a state. It's just like one of those things that exist out in the ether. Yeah. It's not really part of America.
It's a way. Come back to the contiguous states.
The contiguous states, yeah.
Contiguous is such a weird word.
It is a weird word. Houston,
like
this episode has been a little bit all over there. We've been talking about RuPaul and the word contiguous, and also I went on a rant about the Russians when we're just supposed to be talking about the Alaskan dividend. This needs to be over for the sake of both of our sanities. Do you have anything to say before we end this episode?
Contiguous.
Contiguous indeed. Goodbye.